Arise, Diablo, Lord of Terror.
Though this be our darkest hour, it may yet be your greatest moment.
So this is day 2, and game servers are crashing. Players are finding ways to bring down our game servers. And what that means is the game server that owns the lock can't really say, hey, I've released that. It's dead. And so we need another paradigm. And we see, all right, there's like 70,000 locked characters. We're way up from the 10,000 we were before. 10,000 is still, when I think about 10,000 people that I'm preventing playing a game, that's extreme. And I ran a query to get all of the affected players. So who are players who have their save data locked by a server? And we took down a production MySQL instance.
Not even death can save you from me.
Welcome back to the War Stories podcast on Critical Point. I'm Kevin Riggle. We're here with Zachery Johnson to tell us about an incident he was involved with, which happened in the Diablo II Resurrected. Diablo II Resurrected launch when he was at Blizzard. So super excited to get into that. One tiny bit of podcast business before we get started, is that we are now available, as they say, wherever you get your podcasts. So there's a link down in the description. You can go subscribe to the audio version of the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, and a bunch of other services. We also have full edited transcripts up there. That's a very important thing. And you can also, of course, find the YouTube link, which is the sort of still the main version, the video version of the podcast. So we'll talk more about that at the end of the show, but just wanted to let folks just tuning in know about that up front. With that, we will roll the titles and get started. We're back. Zach, it's really great to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into a place where you could break production?
Sure. So my name is Zachery Johnson. I am a software engineer who primarily works on the back end, so both on the software side, but also the integration points with database and infrastructure. Currently at Disruptive Games, but at the time of the incident, I was at Blizzard Entertainment working on Diablo II Resurrected, and this incident was around the time of the launch of Diablo II Resurrected. We had run a couple of public betas where people got to actually come in and test the game and whatnot. And this was going to the full feature launch of the game, where we had far more players than betas, given their beta nature. And that led to the discovery of new issues due to the larger player base.
Interesting. What's the kind of difference in player numbers between a beta and a launch? I know very little about the tech side of online gaming, but it's fascinating to me.
I can't recall the exact beta numbers, and I don't think I could disclose those,
Sure.
But I can say it's on the order of at least a magnitude and probably in the 50 to 75 times larger for the full-scale launch than the open beta we have. And this was an open beta, so anybody could download for free.
Okay.
Still quite a difference in scale there.
Yeah, quite different. I guess often open betas have they wipe all of your character progression and items and things after the period, and so there is a disincentive to so seeing somewhere between 10 and 100x the number of users, a couple orders of magnitude on the day of, all kind of landing on your head at once. That's exciting.
Very fun.
Yeah. So what was the first thing that you noticed?
So I think this was day 2, the day I took
Okay.
down production.
Okay.
And day 1 had its fair share of issues, as Diablo
course.
launches are historically known to do.
Okay.
This was a case where on day 1 we had issues. They came up, we resolved them. Nothing was to the degree of no one could play. It was frustrating for a few players. Maybe you got disconnected for some amount of minutes, but it wasn't a total outage. So we came off of day 1 feeling relatively good about where things stood. Obviously, we wish it had gone better. We wish we had load tested this better, et cetera, but that's all retrospective stuff. And when we came into day 2, it was, all right, let's continue working on these known issues we have. Let's try to get the game in the most stable state possible. And one of those issues was around character saves. And this is where we'll have to get a little bit into implementation details to fully understand what went wrong. But the important thing we wanted to ensure was that only one game server had mutable access to your save data. This is the prone issues where, if you were somehow connected to multiple game servers, there could be a last right win situation, there could be item duplication issues, and the Diablo economy is very sacred to players. Like, given some items are super rare, being able to duplicate them and treat them like candy could invalidate someone else's hard work. So
Sure.
The sanctity of the economy was the forefront of our mind.
Okay.
So by locking, let's go ahead.
So sorry. So partly for me, because I don't really have a picture of the system architecture in my head. So like when I log into, I don't think I played Diablo, but other Blizzard games. Like when I logged into WoW, for example, World of Warcraft, the big multiplayer online game, I would connect to a particular server. So there might be like a North America server, and it would have a fancy name. And like some of the servers would allow player versus player combat. Some would just be player versus environment. Some would be like roleplay servers. And so I like naively sort of might think of those as being like, okay, there's a computer in like Blizzard is Irvine. I did the same thing the first time we chatted. Blizzard is Irvine, and I might imagine that there's actually a physical box in Irvine with that name like stenciled on the front that I am talking to. That's probably not what's going on here, but that's a sort of initial guess.
Right. Yeah, I think. Don't quote me on this. I'm pretty sure all of the Irvine-based compute has been decommed or otherwise deprioritized, and it is largely utilizing cloud infrastructure.
Okay, cool. So moved to Amazon's web services or Google Cloud or Microsoft Cloud or whatever. Okay. So now there is a box somewhere in Oregon, plausibly, that Amazon owns and maintains, and y'all have like a piece of that, a virtual machine running on that box. But it is like when I connect to, Rehoboth server, I'm connecting to like an actual just like single, like probably fairly beefy virtual machine in AWS, for example.
These were multi-tenant VMs. The game server process is pretty small.
Oh, interesting.
So we were able to get quite a few running, and there's reasons why you wouldn't necessarily want to do multiple processes in one VM.
Yeah. Right.
But it was definitely a possibility because the game server process is not super demanding, especially to a lot of the logic of Diablo 2. I should also clarify this point. Diablo 2 Resurrected was a remaster of the original game that came out in early 2000s. And we wanted to keep as much of that code as possible because the original game was beloved. So imagine that you take a game written in early 2000s and you want to run it on modern compute. It's probably going to do pretty well.
Yeah.
Where it's lacking a few of our modern constructs, like there's linked lists everywhere, but that's okay.
That's of the time, yeah.
And it works. Like
absolutely. All the stuff is probably written in C++, running on Windows, I'm guessing.
It was at the time for early 2000s. That was one of our projects. Was like if we actually want to scale at a cloud level, we need to get this running on Linux, and that was something that we achieved.
Okay. A friend of mine was at 37 Studios back in the day, and he was like, the explanation he gave me for why they were running on Windows at the time was that it was super important for the devs to be able to run the server and the client while they were doing development on their physical workstations. But these days, I mean, the ability to have devs spinning up VMs and is now so much greater that, like, yeah, the world has changed a lot. And so interesting that that's an evolution that's happened in your space too. Okay, cool. Okay, so we're talking. So, and the goal then, if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, is it's very important for the sort of back-end services. There's a shared database somewhere which is maintaining like the state of which person owns which magic items, and so all of the like servers that players are connecting to are then talking to this back-end database, and you've got a sort of leader-follower kind of setup where only one of these database servers do we want to be active and like actually, you know, making updates to the database. The others exist sort of so that because reads in this case are much more common than writes, so you want all of the reads going to like a read replica and only the heavyweight write activity going to the one master or the one sort of like leader database server. Is that
You're correct on all points except for one critical thing,
okay?
and that is that you would think that reads are more common, but actually
Okay.
writes are significantly more common.
Oh, interesting.
A game
Okay.
like Diablo.
Okay. Interesting.
And this again goes back to the item duplication thing. If you have an item, it is paramount that that item exists once and only once. And so you might think, all right, when someone picks up that item off the ground, we're going to create a save. But Diablo 2 allows up to 8 players per game. And you could be anywhere on the map in this game, right? You don't need to be playing together. You could be all over the world. And you could kill a monster extremely quick in Diablo. You know, just like snap your fingers and things are dying. You could be picking up items all the time. And so there's plenty of actions in the game that could invoke a save. And really the only time a game server cares about reading your data is upon your initial join. And it's just going to make, you know, amendments to that existing save over time. So the result of that is we were a very write-heavy game and not a very read-heavy game. So there was some architecture considerations for that. Like instead of having a single source of truth global database, we could have regional databases that do like a write through. So I'm going to write to my regional. That's going to be far quicker latency wise instead of if you're a European player writing over to America's.
Okay.
That would be a disaster for latency.
Oh, God, yeah.
So let's do some write through model where we write to the regional and that eventually propagates back. Again, distributed systems create complexity, and there's a whole bunch of complexity there, and making sure once you log out, we persist that right. Anyways,
sounds like fun. Okay, yeah.
The key insight there is that we are a write-heavy model.
Write-heavy model.
That is where this system is going to fall apart.
Okay. I think also you said something that I hadn't picked up on. I was thinking of Diablo 2 as being kind of like World of Warcraft in having like a bunch of people, but no, you have like only up to 8 people sort of like playing together. And so I don't know how much that changes the backend model, but like, yeah.
This is also an artifact of early 2000s game design, because a lot of modern game like Diablo 4 has moved to what is more similar to the WoW model, right? Where there's a shared hub where everyone match makes to, and then you run off on your own, and those might be their own servers hosting their own instances. But to the player, there is no concept of a game or a lobby. It's just an open world they could go out and explore.
Okay.
And Diablo 2 Resurrected did not have such a fantasy, and it's you're going to click a game in this list, and you're going to go there, and you know who the other 7 people are, and you'll have fun that way. So it is a different kind of game design.
Yeah. Different trade-offs to make there, but okay. And I guess like, is it the case that you can assume that generally people will be writing to the same, will be in the same regions, and so I guess they're all on the same server, so it's not about where the players are, it's where the server they're connected to is, and...
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So you just have to worry about the server's connection to the backend database rather than the player's connection to the backend database, which is
correct.
Which is nice. Okay, so we've got game server, we've got the backend database of doing a ton of writes to it. Every time one of those little goblins goes down and drops a pile of gold, we're um, adding a row to a database somewhere, maybe a few rows.
Yes, it can be. It's a lot of writes, and I should clarify that rather than doing a row per item drop, which is a little bit more modern of like immutable ledger style of like here's all the events that have gotten us to this state. It was just a binary object that got stored in the database, right? Like serialize player's inventory, shove it in here.
Interesting.
And it's binary objects are very large, and you have to consider what is our database technology going to do with possibly 8K, 16K of data that we're shoving into a row, and checking for changes in that. So
unstructured data, it's just a blob.
Yep, unstructured.
And we're like updating the same row every time this
yes
changes? Interesting. Okay. As a software engineer, I worry about changes to serialization and deserialization formats. This like indexing, like all of this is starting to give me heart palpitations. But okay, this is a somewhat different model than what I'm used to, from a like SQL kind of world where everything is very structured. And I guess what I'm also taking on this is that you're not really doing queries on the information in this blob. Like
yes, and that's the key insight. We were using MySQL. That is the backing database for this.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
but
it's very performant.
Yeah, the queries we're interested in aren't about the player's inventory. That has almost never been a business logic factor. That's more of a after the fact business analytics factor. And we capture that kind of data through on-demand gameplay events that get sent to telemetry. So just your elk stack that's running like, okay, player picked up this item. So if we want to do business insights, we do it there. And then the database is strictly the true state of the player.
Okay. Got it. Interesting. Okay. So with that sort of like systems context, with this little system diagram in our heads, someday I'm going to do these podcasts with a whiteboard, and like that'll make it easier to visualize. But with this little system diagram of game server, database, players, updating this row in the database with this blob of player inventory data very frequently. What happened? What's next?
Yes. So let's talk about locks. And specifically, this is an abstract concept that we are putting on the MySQL model, not necessarily like a lock you would think in SQL, like I'm going to read this row, let me lock these rows.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so not actually using MySQL's built-in sort of transaction row locking mechanisms.
We will use that. That's ultimately what brought down production. Spoiler.
Okay.
But
great.
the locks here are the abstract model we're applying. It's effectively another name for a mutex, where the game server says, I am the exclusive owner of this. Okay. When I update this player's data, it will succeed. No one else can do that, such that I know that my view of the player's data is true.
Interesting. So you're layering. So there's another table in the database, which is basically like which game server owns this player's data and is allowed to write to it. And at least theoretically in the game code, you're supposed to check that table, make sure that it's you as the game server before you go do the writes. I'm guessing that something here broke. I'm guessing that didn't work.
So luckily, the way it broke is the way we want it to. And by that, I mean player save data is paramount. It is the thing we care about most. We don't want to corrupt saves. We don't want to duplicate items, etc. So what happened on day 2 was that these locks were not releasing correctly. You can imagine a case where
Classic.
it's C++, memory safety is tough to do.
Yes.
Memory safety.
Polite suggestion at best.
Yeah. So this is day 2, and game servers are crashing. Players are finding ways to bring down our game servers. And what that means is the game server that owns the lock can't really say, hey, I've released that. It's dead. And so we need another paradigm. We do have timeouts on locks, etc. Like if a game server goes down and never comes back, how do we handle that case? That was considered. But you have to imagine a player is clicking and now nothing is happening. And they're like, server crashed, I'll go find a new game. So they go back, they find another game, they hit play, and their old server has not come back up. There is no way for that server to say, hey, release this lock, because it's not back yet. It's still dead. You can imagine some cron job that's just looking should I bring back the server? And unfortunately, they were named servers and like server 123 and not, something more modern where it's like we don't care about the server instance.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Okay, so this is servers are still pets here.
Yes, they're definitely pets and not cattle. So when
Yes.
server 100 goes down, it's going to come back up and then release the locks it had. But
Okay.
prior to that, it still has the lock.
Interesting.
So,
and so the server actually has to affirmatively sort of like update this row in the database saying I'm no longer the owner of this thing. There's not like, I was sort of imagining when you said that the lock's timeout that like when I grab the lock as the game server, I also sort of timestamp that, and another game server knows that after 5 minutes or whatever, if that row hasn't been updated, then it can grab it itself. But like no, the server, the original
that
game
was
server.
The case.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Yeah, so we had some relatively short timeout, make it 3 minutes, let's say. 5 is also a good number. I don't recall what it was exactly. But as a player, your game server crashed and you want to keep playing. So you're going to hit play right away. Like, find me another game. And you're like, all right, I got a game server here. Let me join. And the game server says, no, I can't lock your data. You don't get to play.
Right.
And so now a player is sitting in the front end and being told they can't play the game because their data is locked. And unfortunately, we did put the error message that says save data is locked. So if you go and look at the forums or the blogs at the time, we talked about lock save data all the time, which is like revealing the implementation details to players isn't a huge deal. But as a developer, they start talking about it as if there's solutions they could offer. And it's like,
oh, yes. Right. Yes.
Just unlock it. I forgot to.
Right. Yes.
It's just one of those things where it's like, I understand why there's very vague error messages now. And it's,
yeah, it's always been a thing. There's, the error codes, I play a lot of Star Citizen, and like for a long time, the 30K error, the dreaded 30K error, which was just like the game server has gone away. Have a nice day. And so when the things started getting iffy in game, chat would suddenly fill up with like 30K question mark until either like the game server recovered or you got the kicked out of the game. But I don't know. I find as a player, it's nice to have at least a little bit more context, just because otherwise you're sitting there staring at, something that says 30K and you're like,
yeah, this is my bruised and fragile ego talking, of course, because in the moment when this bug is happening and you have players giving feedback like, hey, I'd like to play the game. Like, I'm trying. I'm really trying.
Right. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, like you say, if I were a game developer, I would simply not lock the save data.
I would just unlock the save data. If it's locked, unlock it. What are you doing?
Come on, guys. What are you doing? Yeah. Like, distributed systems are hard. Well, I hope that this, podcast helps explain to some players, like, why it is not as simple as unlocking the save data. A little bit of what's going on behind the scenes. So players are starting to see they're starting to get kicked out of the game, or the game stops responding.
Yep.
And then they go to log in again and they see save data locked and they can't continue playing.
Yep. And there's no action they could take to fix this.
Right,
there isn't like okay, unlock me, roll back my save data. I don't care that I lost a little bit of progress. It's just you can't play until we unlock that save data. So this was our dilemma to solve on day 2. Is this happens and it's unfortunate, right? But servers are going to crash. And if you wait 5 minutes, you'll be unlocked and you get to play. Except some players weren't being unlocked. And we saw that there was a growing number of people who were just stuck in this locked state. At first it was 1,000, and then it was 5,000, and it was 10,000. And you think these are players that are unable to play, period, and we can't tell them just to wait it out. There's some bug here we don't understand fully.
Right. Okay. And how did you notice this? Was it like the forum started filling up, or like what was the first thing that sort of like got people's attention?
The forums is a big one. And Blizzard is they have a very good customer service department where there are people actively monitoring Twitter. Bless their hearts. That job must be miserable. But they're getting player feedback and they're passing it on to the game team. Like, hey, these players are complaining about this. What can we do about it?
Okay.
And so we saw the volume of that increase.
Okay. And so I forget. I don't think we actually said what year is this.
Oh yeah, this is September 2021.
2021. Oh, okay. Oh, so this is very recent.
Pretty recent. Yep.
Yeah. And so Twitter is a thing, and you're getting this feedback basically in real time. Then.
In real time.
And the internal customer support processes are able to start feeding this into to the devs in basically real time. And so, okay, that's nice. So you don't have to wait like we did in the old days till like, somebody, until that forum thread blew up and the forum moderator like sent an email out and like somebody from the social team is just like, raises an incident in Slack basically, and like everybody starts working on it.
And we got feedback even quicker, which is funny. But Blizzard makes video games, and video games are streamed on multiple websites. There's YouTube, there's Twitch. There might have been Kick at the time. Like, there's a lot.
It's become huge. Like,
exactly.
Who knew that watching people play video games is actually a lot of fun and enormously successful business.
Like,
me too.
I watch streamers all the time. I watch esports, etc. So when you launch a game, you boot up Twitch.
When we met, I was in Las Vegas for Black Hat, the cybersecurity conference, but you were in Las Vegas for Evo, fighting game tournament. Yes. Which was happening at the same convention center, and it was like super fun
across the hall,
figuring out who was there for which conference. It was great. So, and it made connections like this happen. So, okay, so are you like internally like watching Twitch streams of people playing? Okay.
Blizzard was sponsoring certain big streamers to get them play the game and whatnot. I had already.
Oh no. Okay. That's even better. Worse.
Oh, like, it gets worse. Okay. But there are streamers that I enjoyed as we developed the game. People were just like, "Oh, I've played Diablo 2 for years. They're remastering it. How cool!" And those people are like the passionate ones, and those are the people you're making the game for, really. Like, this is their childhood. We get to bring back to life and play with other people. And not to Zoomer anybody out, but like I was 4 when the game came out, I believe, originally. And my mother isn't letting a 4-year-old play Diablo. It's a very gory, bloody, demonic game. And so just to be able to experience that and play the game they remember is super cool. So I wanted to see the reactions on Twitch of people just smiling and laughing and enjoying the game. And I boot up a Twitch stream and it just says save data locked. And that's like, it's devastating.
And you're like, oh, not only is this bad for them, these people I care about, this is my fault.
Yes, it's my fault. I got to go fix this.
Yes.
And so the way we established the, not necessarily root cause, but a symptom, is run a SQL query and see what locks have expired, as in are older than 5 minutes and are still being held. Like we haven't cleared out that row or reset the timestamp, etc. And when we ran that query periodically, it was just growing. And so our solution is, we don't know why these aren't being released, but we can manually release them until we fix that bug. We're going to update the rows where the lock timer is greater than that 5 minutes, and they haven't been released. And then players, if they retry again, should be able to get into games.
Okay.
So that was our plan. Every X minutes, someone go check it and manually release them.
Oh, wow. So somebody's sitting there with a SQL console open, logged into the
production database,
main production database, as an admin user, every 5 minutes being like, update, update owner for all, where all, whatever. Okay. Right. We've all been there. Been there. And this is having to do it every 5 minutes is a little bit more aggressive.
It's a little extreme.
But yeah.
And it was something that was scriptable. We didn't dare script it because doing that to a production database is real scary.
Yeah, not in the moment. Like we can like patch stuff over, especially for a live thing, for a live service. We can patch stuff over with somebody just pressing enter for a while. Eventually we'll give them a drinking bird that can do that automatically, and then we'll write the script, and then we'll go on from there. But
so that was the play. We're going to do this periodically, and we're going to let people play and whatnot. Right. And so that we were doing that as early as day 1.
Okay.
Because we saw that issue happening, we caught it in the second half, and like, all right, this is something we'll address tomorrow in day 2.
Okay.
And I log in for day 2. Good old 7 a.m. on day 2 of our product launch. You got to be in pretty early for your shift. And we see, all right, there's like 70,000 locked characters.
Oh
no. We're way up.
Yes.
From the 10,000 we were before. 10,000 is still, when I think about 10,000 people that I'm preventing playing a game, that's extreme. But 70.
Yeah. 10,000 is more than lived in the town that I grew up in. Exactly. So like that's it's not a city. It's town, but it's still a lot of people.
And when you think about holding the happiness of a small town in the palm of your hand, it's like,
Yeah.
I need to fix this.
I need to fix this. Yes.
And so day one, we were pretty cautious again. Like you mentioned, doing these queries on a production database is dangerous work. So we ran this by our database experts, DBEs, and we'd like, hey, here's the queries we're going to run. Please give them a look over, and then we'll run them. Day two, my ego had gone unchecked for all of day one because we were fixing problems left and right, and it feels good to fix problems and see people play and et cetera, et cetera. So day two, we're like, let's keep trucking on. Let's do what we did yesterday. And I ran a query to get all of the affected players. So who are players who have their save data locked by a server? And I was going to put this in a temporary table, and then we could start developing a script that does this unlock based on this table of data we have now. That's a temp table and not the main table.
Okay.
So I ran my SQL query, select star from players where blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. And then I ran it, and then it didn't respond, and then it didn't respond, and then a bead of sweat rolls down my face as I hear someone else from the call say, oh, I just disconnected from the game. And so my query to create a temp table locked every row in the players table in order to create that temporary table. And so these game servers that are trying to save out have these rows locked. They're failing to save. Now the database is getting overwhelmed, and total system outage as game servers can't write. There was a exponential backoff. It was not an effective exponential backoff. Databases getting repeatedly slammed, and we took down a production MySQL instance.
Okay. And so this is not getting locked at the game server level. This is not getting locked in this lock table that we have. This is the underlying MySQL locks.
Yes.
MySQL sees, oh, we're doing I guess, yeah, it's an up. I'm curious why it wound up locking those rows if you were just reading from them to create the temporary table. That is surprising
I'll mention
to me.
that I did not get this query signed off by our DBEs.
Okay.
Which is an important distinction to make here. This is the first time we broke from procedure and did not, run these queries by. It was 7 a.m.
Right.
Wanted to be helpful.
Right. Yeah.
And I was slightly less than helpful.
Just slightly.
Slightly less than helpful. And so we did, and there was another incident in the betas that didn't mention, but we found another bug in MySQL involving too many concurrent connections, which is a really fun one to solve. But
that's also very fun. Yes.
Yeah, because you imagine we have lots of game servers that all need to connect to this global database.
Right.
There is a limit. We found it.
Yes. Okay.
Story for a different time. In that moment, it's like, all right, this query I ran took us down. It caused major contention of the database.
Now
we've gone dark.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. What did you do?
In the moment, the only thing you can do is be 100% honest. Like, I ran this query, and this is what happened.
Yeah.
How do we get back to a point where anybody could play, period?
Yeah.
And so this involved paging a DBE right away. There might have been one on the call at the time, but, page out, create the incident.
Yeah.
And we got the instance back online, SQL instance, and we saw game servers successfully connecting again and whatnot.
Okay.
So through just standard operating procedure, everything kind of self-healed to where players could occasionally jump on and play a game, and we're seeing some sort of recovery. The fallout is where things got interesting, because we started with 70,000 locked characters. After things came back up, I believe we were at around 250,000 locked characters. So basically anybody in the game at the time who got disconnected is now in this garbage state that we need to figure out how to resolve.
Got it. Okay. So you've run the query and it's locked the entire player database, basically. All of the game servers are like, can't talk to the database. Good luck, bye. Are they down, or are they just like
That's a really good question. I believe our logic at the time was a crash. I believe the game servers just crashed rather than stayed alive, waited for the connection to come back.
Okay.
I'd have to really dig through the archives there, but the end result for players was the same, in that nothing they were doing was working.
Right.
The saves were not happening.
Right.
So
yes. Okay. And so the database has actually also just crashed. Like the MySQL process is just like
has stopped running. Yes.
Okay. Interesting. That's also surprising to me. But so game servers are crashed. MySQL process is crashed. Somewhere there is a little watchdog, probably timer, which is going to go restart these things. But like the DBE can also come in and just go like prod the MySQL process until and like start a new one.
Right. I believe the actual recovery process there was we switched our replica database to be the primary.
Okay, great.
Primary is long dead.
Right, yes.
And at least we could recover more quickly and not fiddle with starting up a process and maybe
not
have some room to
deal with like reading all of that data off of disk get started, which is why we have replicas in the first place. So great. Okay, so the failover there happens properly then. Whether that's a manual failover, an automatic failover, like you go from the primary to the replica. Replica is now the new primary. Congratulations on your promotion. Now get me some fucking air support. And so the game servers can now connect to the new primary, but these pretty much everybody in the game now is in this like locked save file state. Okay.
And so a few thoughts there. One, once players can start reconnecting, that feels good. That's a sign of recovery. Two, things are worse than when I started. We still have the locked character issues, and now there's more of them. How do we actually want to address this? And three, this is a personal one, but I am responsible for all of this.
Right.
This is also the most major screw up of my career, bar none. Right. This is my actions have caused hundreds of thousands of players to feel worse.
Yeah.
And that's not why I wanted to make games or be a software engineer. I want these people to be happy. Yeah. And so in that moment, I am feeling a devastation I have not felt before in my professional career. Like that, this is my fault. So once things have stabilized and we know what the situation's like, I need to take a walk. I asked the war room, hey, I am more emotional than I am rational right now. I need to step away, but I'll be back to help. So in hindsight, that was a very healthy thing to do, and I'm glad I did. I did 2 laps around my neighborhood, just really took some deep breaths, grounded myself, and I was like, okay, I'm ready to contribute again to the problem we have. And that's when you go to the incident leader and like, how can I be useful? No longer do I want to be running the queries. I'll do it if I need to, like if I need to be the one to execute them, but I want to be helpful first and foremost. So how do I be helpful?
Yeah, good. That is very smart. So much of incident response is about managing, like, as a subject matter expert, like my own emotional state and, keeping it in a place where I can be productive and useful. And so also, like, this is 2021, so this is fully remote. You're working from home. Yeah. Everybody else is also working from home.
Yes. The Blizzard operations team was on site.
Okay.
I believe they were the only people approved to be on site were people who like monitor the global operations.
Yeah.
But yes, everyone else was fully remote.
Okay. Oh, and so Blizzard has basically a software operations center, we would call it, in
Irvine.
Irvine. Yeah. Okay, cool. And so those were the people who were, that's fascinating. That talking with them sounds like it would be, yeah.
Oh, they have some stories. I hope you could find an operations center person.
Yes. I used to work at Akamai. I forget if we talked about this. And, our network operations folks there I worked a lot with them. And we actually had like follow the sun kind of coverage. And we had the big sort of like mission control space in the office in Boston that, it was a little bit for show, but it was also real. And and it was the kind of thing where like everybody, that was the kind of, way that we sold people on working at Akamai was like, you can be part of a thing,
Right.
organization which does this. Like, we were delivering a quarter of the traffic on the web in that era, and so like it's like, yeah, you can be mission control for a quarter of the web. And at Blizzard, you can be mission control for WoW and Diablo 2 and all these other games that, yeah, people love and enjoy. So, okay. But most of the people on this incident are remote. Are you all like, is there like a Zoom call? Is there like a Slack channel?
Yeah.
Is there, how are you coordinating?
So for a launch in particular, we had a war room, which is just a Zoom call with stakeholders. That could be our immediate team, and then the operations center, and then, C-suite level, if they were interested. That typically doesn't happen until you bring down the game. Then they're really interested.
Yes, indeed. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And so because this is a launch, this is just a thing that you like set up from the beginning. You like, we know that we're going to need to coordinate. We know that stuff is going to break, so we're just going to be on the call. And so this was at least already something, like, you didn't have to wake people up, get people out of bed.
This was 7 a.m. So some people did not like being in the call that early, but it was a known factor. And certainly the time to response is significantly higher when you have the Zoom call already running and you make the mistake. So
yes, exactly. Yes, cool. Well, and I don't know. Personally, I always prefer doing this stuff over audio rather than like over Slack. Yeah, but so okay.
Definitely.
And who is sort of like the incident commander? Who's running the incident the launch?
It is a rotation.
Okay, good.
So there's someone from the various tech leads across Blizzard, and not even in Diablo, but just like every team. Like, you could have the World of Warcraft tech director doing your incident, and that's just to get operational knowledge across and have people be less siloed, which is, in my mind, a very good idea.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah, you can't do stuff of this complexity without it. I believe.
And so I forget who was the incident manager at the time, but just a tech director who was, trying to ask the right questions to get us to resolution.
Right. Yes.
And then
fairly senior enough in the organization. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
And then leading on our team side was myself, given my knowledge of the systems we had, but also my manager, who was, the more formal POC of like, hey, how can we do this, etc.
Right.
So I was doing more of the I was doing more of the grunt work more than the, directional of like, let's choose to do this, let's choose to do that.
Got it. Okay. And your manager is probably also coordinating with other teams as necessary to like get work to happen, make things go. Okay. And your team is responsible for not like the databases directly, but sort of the game server's interaction with these databases.
Yeah. Well, when I say my team, I'll refer to the server engineering team, and that was about 6 or 7 people.
Okay.
And then SREs as well, very important. And so those folks are monitoring health, and we're more so monitoring, I guess also health, but not system health, but like gameplay health and
application health versus the underlying sort of like health of the computers.
Yeah. And so my role in that incident was, hey, given this bug, what do we think the cause is? How can we investigate it? Let's get more info on that. And this is very early in my career. I'm saying that still very early in my career, but I think this was
2 years later. Sure.
Yeah, this was my second full year in the industry. And so I was certainly out of my depth in terms of like depth of knowledge, but I knew our architecture pretty well.
Yeah.
I could tell you what's likely going wrong. And so when these things happen, I'm like throwing out solutions and running queries before getting approval, and just the run of the mill stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. So you go take a lap around the neighborhood. You go like talk to the incident manager. Be like, I gotta step away. I gotta like take a deep breath. See the sky, touch grass, as the kids say, and come back in a frame of mind to be helpful. And so here you are back.
Yes. Back to the desk. And the first thing I observe is we are actively working on the scripting method to release these locks now. Given that releasing 250,000 manually would not be necessarily wise, given that, one, I had just introduced major lock contention with a single query. We were looking for a slower burn way to release all of these locks, and one that we could leave passively going as we investigate the root cause which is somewhere in the game server.
Okay. Yeah.
And so
given that like this, what was supposed to be a non-destructive, non-locking read query has just locked all of the rows and taken the game server down hard, and the database down hard. Doing a not destructive, but like mutating, updating all of these rows, in the whole player table is also probably going to lock all those rows. It is definitely going to lock all those rows, and it is going to take the game server down hard again. Let's not do that. That's smart.
Yeah. So we decided let's commit to doing the scripting strategy. Kind of forced our hand on that one, but at this point, let's commit to it. And then while I gave feedback there and like, here's what I did, here's the query I ran. I don't remember it offhand, which would have been helpful info, but here's what I ran. Here's how we could approach doing the scripted solution. I then moved over to the C++ side and said, where is this bug? Let's try to get a software solution to this so we don't need to be running database queries anymore, because this is madness.
Right. Yeah. We can put the fire out, and we can sort of set up this process to sort of like patch stuff over every 5 minutes, but we gotta solve this longer term so that we, not the fire isn't just out, but like the building is actually like patched up and like structural again.
Yep.
Okay.
And yet that was the rest of my Tuesday was
Yes.
wallowing in guilt and simultaneously looking for the solution that gets us in a better place.
Yeah.
And I think that solution actually came on Wednesday. I think the day after we found here's
day 3.
If it's not the root cause, it's certainly a bug, and we could
one
fix
of the
this
contributing factors.
Yes.
We would say in my in my lexicon. Yes. So what was the bug?
It had to do with string comparison and
classic.
It's yeah, especially too. I forget what encoding we were using for.
Oh no.
The database in particular. I'm sure it was the one that gets thrown in examples all the time. I'm sure that was the one we were supposed to be using.
UTF-8.
There's some specific extension to that. I'll have to find it. I'll Google it.
Okay. Yeah.
There's some encoding we were using on the database, which was correct. And then what the game
yeah.
server was sending was slightly different variant, because at the time we were not allowing Unicode player names. It was ASCII only, which was a Diablo II restriction.
Okay, sure, right.
That's something that
early 2000s.
Who's on the
internet? ASCII. Yeah.
And so that did eventually change, because
of
we felt like, hey, let's let people communicate and express themselves in languages they prefer.
We have players outside of the US now.
Yeah. Let's actually think globally a little. But so we made that change later, and we just, while we were working on the bug fix, wait, this string comparison just won't work in certain cases.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. If it had been a pure ASCII versus to UTF-8 comparison, I believe that it should have worked. Yep. Yeah. Now Windows defaults to UTF-16 as its native string representation for reasons. So that would, especially if you were doing the comparison bytewise, then that would break but that should have broke. I don't know. I implemented Unicode support as my first project out of school, and so I have all of these details locked away in neurons that I access only under duress. But
you read code point, and it just all comes flooding back to you.
It really does. It really does. Yes. So so there's a string comparison error issue where, under certain circumstances, certain players' names just So, and that's interesting. Okay, so the server can correctly write their names or something, this comparison is happening correctly on the write of this lock, but it's not happening correctly on the release of this lock.
Yeah, and I believe when I say string comparison, obviously the failure is happening because we can't associate this player with this row and unlock the data or whatever.
Yeah.
I believe it was something due to the size of the buffer in certain cases, et cetera, where we're truncating off, or
interesting.
Just the last few characters or whatever. The exact details
it's
lost on me.
Well, that's fine. Yeah.
But the ultimate cause there was like, okay, this is of course is a very simple fix to actually unlock these players once we go looking for it and run with a debugger and et cetera, et
Okay,
cetera.
yeah, okay. So it just straight up there is a bug in the game. Like you sort of, the ultimate conclusion here really is just like kind of where you started. Like there's a bug somewhere in the game which is not releasing these locks. We go find where that bug is and we go fix that bug, and now the game starts releasing the locks.
Yep. And this was a thing we caught in beta, and we assumed as risk because we need to release a product. We put out the date, etc., and we're accepting this risk. We know it can happen. We didn't think it would happen on this scale, which is why the bug wasn't as prioritized. And then it happened. We prioritized the bug, and then things get fixed. And that's just game production in action. But typically, we skip the part in the middle where we take down production.
We try, but obviously not always. Okay, and so in the beta, you were seeing this in like 1, 2, 3 kind of players out of the 10,000 had this issue. So you're like, and there are many issues which are affecting like 50, 100, 250 players, which you're like, we got to fix these first. We know that these are going to cause problems. The ones that are affecting 1,000 players, like we can't launch the game without fixing them. So like you're just burning down sort of based on like observed incidents of these issues. And once you get down to a certain level and the release date is, next week or 2 weeks from now, you're like, we got to make the launch commit. We got to get this out. And then you encounter the real world, and it turns out that, of the 190,000 more people who are suddenly showing up to your game now, like, thousands of them have whatever underlying, quirk of reality that causes them to hit this failure case. And oops.
And we didn't, along with the lower player count in beta, we had very few server crashes in beta.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Which is partly of like, okay, we made some, between beta and launch, we made some changes that were unstable. We got to review our code review process because that's the volume increase of that is kind of unnerving.
That's concerning. Yeah.
But then additionally, the beta only went up to character level 30 of 100 total in the full game.
Okay.
And only 2 of the acts, and there's 5 acts. So there's, significantly less content to be explored and reveal crashes.
Oh, okay.
So, to some certain degree, we were expecting more crashes, but it was a thing we had to figure out. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah. And you were kind of hoping for this stuff to wait until people hit character level 30, which would take them at least like a few days?
Nope.
No? Okay.
You'd think.
Okay.
But man, the speedrunners for this game could get, to level 80 in about 6 hours.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay.
I'll say that it's not a linear scale from 1 to 100. It is like exponential.
Yeah.
But still,
That's
This game's been out for a while, and they know all the tricks.
That's true. Yeah, they've had a decade. No, they've had 15 years or something to go figure out all of the shortcuts. So so you do well, and you knew that you were going to hit this stuff at least. But also, like, I don't know. I suspect that the speedrunning community understands that, like, if the beta only goes up to level 30, 6 hours in, they're at level 60, and then they hit some bug. They're like, they know what's going on.
And the locking issue. So this was one of the, we got to release these locks. But people having their accounts locked is just an unpleasant thing. Because if you're playing and the server crashes and you have to wait for it to come back up, and you don't know when Blizzard brings the servers back up to unlock your stuff. Like it was poorly architected from the beginning is what we learned over the months. And so there's actually a few blog posts that we wrote to explain our technical changes that were coming to save data to fully eliminate locks and whatnot. And due to a bunch of hard work from other engineers on the team, the lock system got completely overhauled, and it's significantly better today to where you could get into games super quick, and you could get into games so quick that through strictly improvements to our infrastructure and architecture, there came new ways to play the game.
Oh, interesting.
Which is back in old school Diablo II, you could only log in 20 times per hour.
Okay.
Which seems very high, right?
Yeah.
But there's certain enemies you could kill that give a lot of XP, and then you leave the game, and then you rejoin, and you just kill that one enemy over and over.
Okay. And you can basically farm.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And by improving our lock system, we said, why don't we raise the number from 20? Right? Like we could do really interesting stuff if we don't put a limit on how many times players could join a game. And then it was so successful that players completely changed their strategy and just killed these different enemies over and over and over. And they got players to help them kill those enemies faster. And like the time it took to get from level 1 to 100 was completely shattered because we made infrastructure and architecture improvements.
Okay.
Very, very interesting case, but players were upset with us, so we had to make a few changes to balance that out. But I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, but you talk about the sanctity of the economy, and like if players can farm these like ultra rare items, then yeah, reduces the value, and I don't all sorts of secondary effects. So that's fascinating, though. Yeah. The sort of like second and third order effects of what don't feel like game changes. They feel like that's just infrastructure. It's just the stuff that supports but it has an effect too.
It felt weird that we removed a 20-year-old gameplay restriction. The community's like, put it back.
Right. Yeah.
And it's I understand most people aren't joining 20 games in an hour.
Yeah.
But if you do really enjoy killing that one enemy, I think we should let you.
Sure. Yeah. That's, I mean, like I joke a lot about stuff like that when we talk about login restriction, like rate limiting on account logins to make it harder in the security world for people to like do password testing, for example, where, some hacker knocks over a Minecraft forum and gets all of the passwords in clear text because it's a Minecraft forum. And then is like, I wonder who used the same password for this Minecraft forum that they use on their bank account, and goes and runs the email addresses. They do. Surprising and unfortunate number of people do, and we're working to fix that, but we have more work to do. And it's very lucrative for these hackers. So I think they're like, that is sort of, the banks have largely got this figured out now, although they didn't 10, 15 years ago. But anybody who stands up a new web service that has its own login form eventually realizes that, like, oh no, somebody logging in like 20,000 times in an hour, that's not a human user, that is a bot, and we should probably not let them do that, because anybody who can type that fast can wait. But that's interesting that was this, and that the sort of community dynamics around that are different in the sort of like game world than they are in the more businessy oriented world, where people will find different ways to exploit that in the game.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so you found this bug. The database servers are back up. What was kind of I guess you fix the bug, you roll out the fix to production, the game servers start releasing the locks. Was there any other sort of like cleanup work you had to do on the incident?
We preempted the cleanup by nature of having the script running. As soon as I got back, if we hadn't committed to that work, then yes, there would have been quite a few locks to clean up prior to rolling out that game server fix the day after. I'm trying to recall if there was any other fallout. I don't believe so. Like, one thing we're really concerned about is, did we duplicate items? Like, are we going to have to reset everybody back 4 hours, let's say? Because if we've corrupted the economy in any way, this is untenable. We got to just fix that. This is 2 days after launch. There needs to be trust in the economy of this game. And so we were all good there, but that did take some work to figure out, like, let's go through our telemetry and see, does anyone have a wild amount of something that they should not have?
Yeah.
And all good there.
Okay, so that's where you can go to those events that get kicked off by the game server when somebody, kills an orc and picks up the pile of gold or the ultra rare item, and like look at those logs and be like, okay, we don't see, somebody spamming ultra rares on, so that's good. and you don't have to do that at the database level, which is also nice.
Yes.
Because that would be another full table scan.
Very full table.
And have to get into that binary blob that we were talking about.
Yeah, if we wanted to do any operations on the item, that blob would have been long gone, not even in discussion.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So the script has been running. The script has been sort of like releasing the locks for the game server, roll the game server fix out. Was that, it sounds like rolling the server out was a fairly quick process. There wasn't a ton of QA steps or anything that had to go through to get that out the door.
Yeah, we had a good repro internally. We knew what a bad data looks like. We have a bunch of tables, or a bunch of rows rather, of what looks bad. So let's copy those into our development database. Let's recreate it. So we were pretty quickly able to recreate the scenario in which the server did not unlock the data, and then test with the new version. It does unlock. All right, this is a new release. Get it out ASAP. And we did do a rolling deploy. We aren't, at the time, I'm not sure if things have changed. It wasn't a super technologically advanced rollout. It wasn't a containerized server. It was just a binary we drop on a box. And
interesting. Wow.
Start. So
2021, and this isn't CI. There's no CI/CD. Somebody is uploading.
There were CD pipelines to get it out there.
That's continuous delivery. Sorry, my parents watched one of the first episodes and we didn't understand all the acronyms. I'm trying to break stuff up, but yes,
that's a good call out. I'm sure I've used a lot in this episode.
It's part of the work, and people do pick stuff up from context. But so there is some continuous
there was a
delivery
job
stuff.
that was take this build and put it on our game servers, but the way we had to roll it out was not as easy as one push, take that on the servers. Because I believe our game servers at the time were not, our services were red-blue, or red-green, or blue-green, or whatever color pair you would like to use. Where we run newest on one version, and then when we roll out a new version that gets deployed to the inactive, we make that active, and such that there's no downtime for that. We did not have that for game servers. So there was a separate process where we had to drain, and then once it hit 0, restart, and it was very manual, very tedious.
So that's drain user connections. That's no new users are allowed to connect to the server. All new user connections go to a server that's running the new build of the game's server. And then once everybody finishes playing and logs off from the old server, then we kill that server process, and now only new, connections are being made to the new code, and we can see that that's working. I suppose what are you monitoring to check that this isn't recurring?
So the query we ran initially before my snafu was just the check locks older than 5 minutes. If that is happening, there's still a bug here, but otherwise game servers, if there's a lock that is older than that, anyone else has free reign to just this is inactive lock, go for it. So we did notice that decrease. It was not fully gone, but we couldn't reproduce the same scenario locally, so it seemed to be a different bug. And the rollout is the tricky part for the game servers, because again, pets, not cattle. These game servers were special. So once you hit 0, we had to bring it down and restart it on the new version, which was kind of a confusing process where it's stage this binary, but don't run it yet. And then once you restart, forget about the old binary. It was a little bit complicated to do that dance. And that was certainly a retro learning, which is man, it sucks to deploy new versions.
Interesting.
Because it should be fast, right? If we have a bug we want to fix, we have to tell players, hold on, we're slowly restarting them all. It's they don't love that.
And there's some poor SRE in the back who's really functioning more as a sysadmin who is logging into all of these servers and typing a bunch of console commands, and it sounds hoping that they get the console commands in the right order and they don't fat finger anything. And that is a thing that we can build tooling around to automate and manage.
There is a very excellent command and control interface at Blizzard where you can get all of your servers in one web view. And so it was very easy to send off these commands to multiple boxes. But the regexes we had to construct to selectively pick these game servers were nightmarish. And
God.
It was, if you want to talk about fat fingering there, fat fingering a regex and having to just like really regexes are already unreadable, but like trying to just piece out which part is wrong, and regex 101 is constantly bookmarked and open, and it's like,
Yep.
whew.
Yep. Yeah. We can offload that work to a computer, which is better at doing it than trying to do this kind of, it's not quite bitwise string comparison by eye, but it's definitely regexes are regular expressions. They're a tool for doing like very sophisticated searches over text, basically, and we use them all the time in software. But they've been around for a long time. They're deeply arcane. They look like somebody was just mashing on the keyboard, and all of that keyboard mash has meaning. And if you put a slash in the wrong place, or you don't count quite right, or any of 100 other kinds of issues, you can wind up selecting all of the things you want, or none of the things that you want, or a different subset of the things that you want, which you did not want. And yes, no fun to do that. Basically, while people are over in Twitch chat being like, "Well, game's still down." Wonder when Blizzard's going to get around to fixing that. So
I'm working real hard on my regexes, guys. I promise. Any second now.
Any second now. Just gotta just gotta run it through regex tester one last time. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so one of the learnings was like better automation tooling around doing like staged rollouts of these kinds of like fixes. Yeah. Is that a thing that like the newer code bases, newer sort of like server architectures have put into place, and this was sort of like a result of a lot of the code and sort of server architecture being pretty legacy? Or
I would say yes. Certainly in hindsight, I wish we could have modernized the server even more, right?
Sure.
Like having this in containers would have been a breeze.
Yeah.
Because the thought process about restarting a container is like basically non-existent, because you don't really care about its lifetime. It's just give me
a container. It's the lovely thing about containers is like, and that's moving from the sort of like model of servers as pets to servers as cattle, where it's just like, these servers are unhealthy, kill them and restart with healthy servers. Like, and all of the container like ecosystem has built out the infrastructure to do a lot of the like, we're moving connections from one of these pods of servers to another pod of servers without any kind of downtime, and so it's all very a lot of the tooling is already built for you there. And
I would say the other key learning we had there was it's particularly hard in games to really test end-to-end at scale. Like you could do your postman for your servers if they're running HTTP or gRPC. Like you could get pretty good scale with just your standard web dev testing tools. But as soon as you have a custom client running its own protocol and you want to do end-to-end testing, we found that we severely under-tested the game in regards to like some of the gameplay actions players were doing, because they were finding unique ways to lock their characters that we didn't necessarily consider. It's like, that will crash the game. We probably could have caught that with gameplay testing, but how?
Interesting.
And I just bring that up because Diablo 4 did invest very heavily into automated testing. And I think it's pretty widely agreed that Diablo 4 had a very successful launch. Regardless of the gameplay, just like the system health was very good comparatively.
I mean, games have always struck me as a really challenging environment, and this is coming much more from the web dev world, where you make a web request and you've got a session token or whatever, so that the server knows that you're logged in as Kevin Riggle or whatever, but the server is not holding on to a lot of state between web requests necessarily. Generally, a lot of that state is getting persisted somewhere else, and a lot of state is getting persisted locally, and so it's very easy to write an automated test suite where you can run through all the API endpoints and basically be like, does this return the results that we expect? Whereas in a game, like, both a game client is basically a big, weird state machine.
And what is a game if not state?
Yes, 100%. Where in the web world we are trying to remove as much like shared state as possible. That is the only thing that a game is. And So I'm actually like kind of impressed that they were able to do automated testing at all, because that means that they're finding. Yeah, I don't even know how you break that problem down.
I would encourage you and your viewers to pay attention to how stable games are when they launch in the future.
Okay.
Because I think this is a thing the industry is coming around to,
Okay.
where a game that launches poorly will be ridiculed and may lose a bunch of players initially, and that has consequences in the market.
Yeah.
And I think players are no longer going to accept, like, oh, we had server issues. Like, you had server issues on the last 4 launches. What have you learned? What haven't you learned? So
Interesting.
I think we'll see a shift in the coming years about how stable games launch.
Okay, cool.
To see.
Well, that will be very interesting to see. Yeah, because it is a really challenging environment, and also all of the state interacts with each other. Like, that's a thing that makes that particularly challenging. You can't, web app, you can kind of say, these objects and these objects relate to each other in certain ways, and so we'll interact in certain ways. But if these objects don't have a relation to these other objects, then you don't have to worry about their interactions because they can't ever interact. Oversimplifying. We all know the ways that that's not true, and that's the cause of incidents in the web dev world. But in the game, one item can interact with any other item in the game world, and any other player, and any thing in the environment, like any other piece of the state in this system, like any of these things can interact with, and that makes if you can't constrain the interactions, you have just much less ability to enforce invariance over it, basically, and simplify the problem of testing it, because you have to test all of those interactions, but that's exponential, and so you have to pick the important set of those, and that has always struck me as the more I learn about the way the games work internally, the more I'm impressed that games work at all, ever. And there's a lot of human testing, a lot of human QA involved in games, is my understanding.
Yeah.
But that only goes so far, because you have, 20 or 50 or 100 human QA testers, but 10,000, 100,000, 500,000 players, and
I'll start with a prelude by saying human QA is one of the most invaluable and undervalued parts of game development that often gets overlooked. I think there's almost a stigma where they're just playing the game, because that's kind of what a parent who's not super involved with video games might think. It's like, oh, you're just playing video games all day. But the level of detail these folks go to find repro cases and what specifically they were doing is just incredible. And I don't mean to soapbox, but human QA is invaluable to games and should be treated better than they are being treated.
Yeah.
But
I've heard stories of QA testers spending, days or weeks running into the same wall, trying to figure out why there's some bug, why under certain cases you can clip through that wall and fall off the edge of the world and die. And that level of obsession, almost.
We were often given dedicated QA, so this person's very familiar with how backend is integrated, and they don't have a computer science degree.
Sure.
They're just listening to the terms us engineers throw around. They're familiarizing themselves with them.
Yeah.
And they're actually applying them to the game. And it's that is such an invaluable skill set to have someone who's willing to do that, and also just such a complete lack of prioritization on engineering's part to want to help automate some of these things that human testers are doing. But I digress. Human testers are invaluable, and to your point, there's a lot of human testers on games. It's hundreds, I think, is the correct number, more so than tens for the scale
interesting.
Of games.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, but they also have a limited amount of time to do this, and
a game comes out, and let's say there's 100,000 players, right? Yeah. And those players play for an hour, and they just wiped out 3 months of QA time, right? Just in terms of scale,
pure numbers, yes.
QA can't test. There's not enough QA, so things
and
will slip through.
There never can be enough. The world is just the real world is just so much more enormous than any organization we can possibly build, and so we will always be finding things in the real world that we could have found if we had followed the right path, but it's a big pachinko machine, and we're only ever going to get to the parts of it that we get to, and there are always going to be things outside of our you know, at the tails outside of our ability to test, which the real world will show up and we will have to cope with live. So it's then all about building these processes, you know, whether it's automation, whether it's tooling, whether it's experience and skills, and just you know, organizations to like respond effectively in these moments when, like, you know, the real world throws us a curveball. Yeah, cool. That's my soapbox. So what did, like, how did the organization handle it with you?
Yeah, I think this is probably the most influential part of the entire incident for me, was how the team handled a major outage caused by me. And it was nothing but support and like a pragmatism that I didn't really expect. I was expecting some form of retribution, even though the team had never been like that. It's like all I had to do was think a little harder and really just run the query by a DBE, and we could have avoided this. But the team understood that a blameless culture is how incidents get resolved, when you could volunteer that information without fear of retribution, and you could actually resolve stuff. And that stuck with me because I was 24 at the time. Again, never been in an incident of this scale. And I very well could have caused financial damage to the success of the game based on this incident if people stop playing because they lose trust. And it was just, you know, here's what we should have done, here's what we'll do in the future, etc. And it was never personal the entire time. And that was just I'm very appreciative of how that was handled.
Yeah, that's how it should be. That speaks very well of the culture there at Blizzard. Yeah, it speaks very, very well. Yeah. Well, and like, you're never going to make that same mistake again.
Exactly. I have a reverence for the database I did not have before. I understand the power it wields.
Yes.
And really, like, we talk about single source of truth or single point of failure. That big old box of state is what that is.
That,
and
exactly.
You respect that box.
Yes.
Whatever you have to
do
to protect it, you protect it.
Yes, you do. Well, and also it sounds like the organization learned a lot, like, about how important and fragile that box was. And, you know, even sitting here, I'm hearing this and I'm like, this is surprising me. Like, there are some things going on here that I did not know, and I would have made exactly the same. You know, I would have been like, oh yeah, this is a totally safe query to run. Like, I don't need to run this by a DB. Like, it's not changing anything. What could possibly, and that gets me, to finish my thought, what could possibly go wrong if I press the enter key? And so that gets me into asking questions like, oh, what's the storage engine doing under the hood? Like, what storage engine are we running? Like, why is this happening? What does this mean for other queries that we could run in the future, or, you know, other queries that could be running as part of a monthly kind of, you know, background process that could cause similar issues? And where might we see, you know, a similar kind of thing crop up in the future? But yeah, so I hope it sounds like the organization, and it sounds like the folks at Blizzard, like, took those lessons to heart too, and looked a lot at, like, okay, how can we automate the recovery process, and what do we need to learn from this as well, which is, Anything else that sort of, like, stuck out to you from the whole experience?
The only thing that we wrote a blog post when we were going to refactor and get rid of the lock system. And this was one of the rare times where we talked about implementation details with players, where it's like, we talked about, we have this global database, and then we have these regional databases that where the rights go to, and et cetera, et cetera. And something that I was really impressed by was the community, after reading the blog post, was just super appreciative that the developers were talking at all. And it is easy as a game developer, and I'll just generalize to software engineer. We care about our users or players or what have you. But you might not necessarily think of the power imbalance between you two, or necessarily the, like, relationship. Because just us saying, hey, sorry, the game has felt bad lately. Here's the steps we're doing to take it. Here's the timeline. That was super well received. Like, telling your players that things aren't working and you're working on it typically doesn't go well. But just when you put some level of care into the communication, and be like, here's the feedback we've heard. Like, here specifically is how we're listening to you, and not just the good old we're listening. But, you know, here's the feedback we're actioning on. was super well received. And since that moment, I've always thought a little bit more about what is the relationship between a developer and a player. Because I'd like it to be good. I'd like to get to a point where players don't actively dislike developers for adding bugs or making the game worse, which is a modern thing in gaming, which is kind of interesting. And as developers, be completely cognizant that players are your game.
Yeah.
If you have no players, it doesn't really matter what you've built. So respect your players and do right by them. So
Yeah.
but just the reaction to that blog post was very heartwarming to me.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in my like corporate experience, there were times where we were really worried about legal liability if we talked too much about what was going on under the hood, that people would sue us if, we talked too much about what had happened, like, were we negligent or something. But I think that we similarly found that providing a level of context and, really honestly, providing enough detail that people could see, oh yeah, this is a hard problem. And they are doing, they are working on it. They are doing the best they can. And feeling like the community feeling cared for, I think, then I guess the community responds with care for the developers, and that sort of mutual, making that mutual connection happen is important. There's studies about like doctors, who have a similar kind of problem, and a huge liability from like medical malpractice lawsuits. And yet they've found in study after study that like if the doctor just comes out and says, "I'm really sorry, I screwed up, wasn't able to save your, sister, daughter, mother, father, brother, son, grandparent, whatever," that both the family members, come away from that experience being like, oh yeah, the doctor did the best they could, and on the corporate side, like they're much less likely to get sued.
Right.
But convincing management of that is always an uphill battle, and so I'm both grateful to hear that Blizzard management was willing to like talk about this stuff, and that the response was so good. And I hope that sort of like, because I think that it's a pole that we're always going to orbit around, of people being like, no, I don't want to talk about what went wrong. People will, will blame us and think we're bad people, and like people will get mad at us. And so yeah, just keeping that feedback loop healthy and open is like going to be something that we're always working on, that we're always going to have to remind people of and reinforce. So yeah. Zach, this has been super good. It's been really, really fun chatting with you. Where can people find you online?
Basically nowhere.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
I've scrubbed basically all my social media.
Great.
After a wonderful 2022 and 2023, it's for the best, and I'm relishing it.
Good. Enjoy freedom, touch grass, and yes, good. Well, just have to find you when you pop up on other things. And what are you working on now? I forget the name of the place that you're at.
Yes, I'm at a studio called Disruptive Games. We're working on an unannounced project that's being published by Amazon Game Studio. No details I could really provide because it's all... but keep an eye out for it. Disruptive Games, really happy with what we're working on. Excited to show it off.
Good, yes. Well, we'll find out when we find out. Super excited for it, yes. This has been Critical Point, the War Stories podcast on Critical Point, with Zach Johnson. I'm Kevin Riggle, and we'll see you all next time, folks. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked that, please like and subscribe down below. It really helps the channel. And also, we have another great episode coming hot on the heels of this one, and you aren't going to want to miss it, so do get subscribed. Also, if you have any insight into that MySQL behavior that Zach and the team at Blizzard ran into, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. I have some guesses, but it's been a long time since I ran MySQL in production, and I know some of you have been deep in the weeds on it. Like I said at the top of the show, we're now available in audio on all of the major platforms, as well as video on YouTube, plus full edited transcripts, which you can find at warstories.criticalpoint.tv. Getting professional transcripts and captions done and integrated is maybe the single most time-consuming and expensive part of getting each show done and posted, but I personally want the show to be as accessible to as many people as possible, so please take advantage of them. Intro and outro music is Senpai Funk by Paul T. Starr. You can find me on Twitter as at Kevin Riggle and on Mastodon at Kevin Riggle at ioc.exchange. My consulting company, Complex Systems Group, is on the web at complexsystems.group. And with that, folks, till next time.